What's up, y'all? It's your man Kurt from Triad Hip Hop Podcast. So this weekend, since it's the last weekend of Black History Month, I wanted to kind of make sure I did a lyrical breakdown to really end off Black History Month the right way. So this time, I'm doing some lyrics from a group that you wouldn't think of as a typical rap group, but they really help to shape what we know as hip-hop today, especially the art of rap. And I'm talking none other than the Last Poets. And this is one of my favorite groups. I remember when I first got introduced to them. They were out of New York, and I mean, they hit heavy. And they did basically spoken word poetry with some drums in the background and things like that. And I mean, they were heavy, I'm telling you. And when I say heavy, I mean mentally and spiritually, they really laid it down. You know what I mean? They gave you some shit to think about. So this is one of the joints called When the Revolution Comes. And it's very prophetic. And, if you really listen to it, you'll know what I mean. So I really want y'all to pay attention to some of these lyrics. So I'm going to let the joint play. And when I come back, I'm going to break down the lyrics the best way I can and what it means to me. All right? So let's get right into it. Last Poets, When the Revolution Comes.
When the revolution comes.
When the revolution comes.
When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes, some of us will probably catch it on TV with chicken hanging from our mouths. You'll know it's revolution because there won't be no commercial. When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes.
When the revolution comes.
Preacher pimps are gonna split the scene with the communion wine stuck in their back pockets. Faggots won't be so funny then, and all the junkies will quit their nod and wake up when the revolution comes. When the revolution comes, transit cops will be crushed by the trains after losing their guns, and blood will run through the streets of Harlem, drowning anything without substance when the revolution comes. When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes.
When the revolution comes.
I hope pearly white teeth fall off the mouths that speak of revolution without reference. The course of revolution is 360 degrees. Understand the cycle that never ends. Understand the beginning to be the end, and nothing is in between but space and time that I make or you make to relate or not to relate to the world outside my mind, your mind. Speak not of revolution until you are willing to eat rats to survive. When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes, guns and rifles will be taking the place of poems and essays. Black cultural centers will be forts supplying the revolutionaries with food and arms when the revolution comes. When the revolution comes, white death will fall off the walls of museums and churches, breaking the lie that enslaved our mothers. When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes, Jesus Christ is going to be standing on the corner of Lenox Avenue and 125th Street, trying to catch the first gypsy cab out of Harlem. When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes, Jew merchants will give away matzo balls and gefilte fish to anyone they see with an afro. Frank Shippen will give away the Apollo to the first person he sees wearing a blue dashiki. When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes, afros are going to be trying to straighten their heads, and straightened heads are going to be trying to wear afros when the revolution comes. When the revolution comes. When the revolution comes.
When the revolution comes.
But until then, you know and I know niggas will party and bullshit and party and bullshit and party and bullshit and party and bullshit and party. Some might even die before the revolution comes.
When the revolution comes, you know what I mean? As you can see, that joint hits hard, and if you really listen, and if you really got an ear to hear and a mind to think, you'll understand they're going deep on you. So let's go right into those lyrics real quick. I know most of them by heart because I've had this album for a while in my CD collection. But, for the sake of not messing it up, I want to make sure I had the lyrics written down. So, of course, it starts off, when the revolution comes. Some of us will probably catch it on TV with chicken hanging from our mouths. You'll know it's revolution because there won't be no commercials. Now, let me go ahead and break that down real quick, because a lot of people ask me over the years, what does he mean with that reference about, some of us will probably catch it on TV with chicken hanging from our mouths. Is that a slight to black people? Is he being disrespectful? Absolutely not. I mean, these brothers were black and they would never disrespect their own people like that. What they're referencing is the act of being unprepared. So what they're saying is when a revolution jumps off, some of us will probably catch it on TV with chicken hanging from our mouths. You're going to be busy sitting there watching the news and all of a sudden because you see some shit jumping off on TV because the news is probably going to be all over it when the revolution comes. So he's basically saying you'll know it's revolution, and that's why he said because there won't be no commercials. You know what I mean? Meaning they're going to be, covering this because it's going to be too big for them to let commercials interrupt. You know what I mean? And think about the times that we're in right now. You know what I mean? And what's going on in today's society. This was made in 1970. I mean, this is what? Freaking 51 years ago? So anyway, then he continues on. He said, when the revolution comes, preacher pimps are going to split the scene with the communion wine stuck in their back pockets. Faggots won't be so funny then, and all the junkies will quit their nodding and wake up when the revolution comes. Now, I know a lot of people are probably thrown by the F word. This is just lyrics, and, it's one of those words that was thrown around a lot more back in the day, so you'll have to excuse it, and if you don't, you might want to skip this video. Sorry. But anyway, so let me break that down. So he said, preacher pimps are going to split the scene with the communion wine stuck in their back pockets. So basically, he's saying that when the real revolution happens, you'll start noticing them preachers who was really pimps, not really genuine all along, those that were in that bracket, they're not going to really stay around to help you or save you when the revolution comes, because they weren't here for anything anyway. They were just here for your money and anything that you consider sacred, like the communion wine or the money that was donated to the church. Once they run off, they're going to make sure to take that kind of stuff with them. And then he said, that's when he said, faggots won't be so funny then, and all the junkies was quit their nodding. But let me go back to the F word. You know what I mean? So that's not a word. That's not a line that's trying to be offensive to gay people at all. What he's saying is, faggots won't be so funny then, because back then it was just more common to, you see some man that's gay or even women, it was more so funny. You know what I mean? It's more so a term that was used for men, but it was more so funny to you. Like, oh man, this guy is not manly at all. You know what I mean? His wrist is hanging and he's feminine and all of this. So, it's always laughable, and, we joke and we, sniggle, when we see men acting like that, because it's not the norm. So what he's saying is when the real revolution happens, those type of people won't be somebody you're going to laugh at, period. And we're getting more so to that day and age right now where people are not just looking at gay guys and just saying, oh, look at him. He just funny acting. You know what I mean? No, these people are being taken way more serious now. And, they're making a space for themselves in society. Think about it. And then he said all the junkies will quit their nodding and wake up when the revolution comes. Meaning, anybody who was an addict or addicted to drugs, we called them junkies back then in the 70s. They're going to wake up and quit their nodding when the revolution comes. Meaning they're going to finally sober up like, oh shit, this shit ain't funny no more. You know what I mean? I can't just sit around and get high all the time. You know what I mean? I got to get the fuck up and do something. And then he said, when the revolution comes, transit cops will be crushed by the trains after losing their guns, and blood will run through the streets of Harlem, drowning anything without substance when the revolution comes. Let me break that down. So he's saying transit cops will be crushed by the trains after losing their guns, meaning basically those who are in authority, like cops, will be trampled and overtaken in the days when the real revolution comes. Think about what just happened at the Capitol a few weeks ago. You know what I mean? People getting to the point where they don't give a fuck about authority no more. You know what I mean? And they kicking in the door, waving the 4.4s and the AKs and the techs and all of that shit. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that that was the revolution, but we're getting to that time where people don't care, about going up against authority. People just don't. So, and then he said, blood will run through the streets of Harlem, drowning anything without substance when the revolution comes. And what he's basically saying there is anyone who is not prepared for the revolution, those of us who just sit around thinking, oh, ain't nothing going to jump off like that. I'm just going to chill and sit around and do my normal thing, just sit around and eat all fucking day and bullshit and watch TV. You know what I mean? That's why he's like, blood will run through the streets of Harlem, drowning anything without substance. Meaning if you ain't got substance, if you weren't prepared for this, you're probably going to get taken out in the wake of it. You know what I mean? I hate to say that, but I mean, that's probably what's going to happen, because those people who are unprepared, what they're going to do? But get trampled and taken out probably, whether they're innocent or guilty. So then he said, when the revolution comes, I hope pearly white teeth froth the mouths that speak of revolution without reverence. You know what I mean? And that's just a reference to people who speak, what's the word I'm looking for? People who speak without substance, or people who, are just speaking to be speaking. You know what I mean? So that's more of a reference to that, in my opinion. Then he said, the cause of revolution is 360 degrees. Understand the cycle that never ends. Understand the beginning to be the end. First of all, let me stop right there, because he's getting real deep right here. He said the cause of revolution is 360 degrees. Understand the cycle that never ends. Because basically when the revolution really comes, we still going to be right back to square one. Everything in this world goes around in a circle, just like the earth revolves around the sun, and spins on its axis. Everything is a circular revolution. So when the revolution comes, it's going to be like a cycle that never ends. You know what I mean? And that's what 360 degrees is, that cycle that never ends. So everything is going to kind of start from square one. When the real revolution comes, we're going to be starting over from zero at the same 0 point, wherever you may call it. And then he said, understand the beginning to be the end, and nothing is in between but space and time that I make or you make to relate or not to relate. You see what I'm saying? He's still giving you that 360 degrees of wisdom and intellect, basically saying that, you know what I mean, the beginning is the end. The end is the beginning. It's all the same. It's all just starting all over. You know what I mean? Everything, every topic or every trend, everything that you see in the world, it's 360 degrees. It's just something that's starting over again in a different way. And so there's really no beginning or end. It just eventually gets to that point where it's starting over. But there's no perfect point of this is the beginning and this is the end, because it's always a cycle. So, and then he says, speak not of revolution until you are willing to eat rats to survive. You see what I'm saying? That's another one for those unprepared people. He's saying, don't talk about revolution if you ain't really about that life. Basically, you have to be willing to eat rats to survive, meaning you have to be in a certain state of desperation, is what he's talking about. Saying that, you can't just say, oh yeah, I'm ready to take on this revolution and make things different and do what has to be done. You can't really say that if you're one of them people who just can't even go a couple of days without fast food or a home-cooked meal or food in general. You know, those are the real motherfuckers that's ready for revolution, because food is like the last thing on their mind. They not really scared about that. A lot of people nowadays are so comfortable in their lives. You know, they like, I gotta have my food. I ain't ate in 3 hours. Something's wrong. I gotta eat. I'm shaking. That's ridiculous right there. You know, and I know I've seen people who do that. I'm not saying that everybody does that. I'm saying that the world is swinging in that type of direction. Think about it. Then he said, when the revolution comes, guns and rifles will be taking the place of poems and essays. Black cultural centers will be forts supplying the revolutionaries with food and arms when the revolution comes. You know what I mean? Black cultural centers will be forts, meaning those places that are safe havens for black people will become a fort that will supply the revolutionaries with food and arms. You know what I mean? Those will be safe places for people who are really ready for the revolution to come and eat food if they need to, and to come and arm themselves, you know, if they don't already have it. And then he said, when the revolution comes, white death will froth the walls of museums and churches, breaking the lies that enslaved our mothers when the revolution comes. So, you know, white death, that could be meaning a whole lot of things. You know what I mean? There really was a disease called white death. That is tuberculosis. At one time it was called white death, or the consumption. And people would turn real pale, you know, and discolored and just real pale, like, and so they would pretty much lose all their pigmentation almost. So you can tell there was something wrong with them. You know what I mean? So that's why they called it the white death. But so he could be talking about that, or he could just be talking about white people in general, meaning, you know, when he says white death will froth the walls of museums and churches, meaning, you know, instead of going into a museum and seeing all these historical artifacts, you'll see, you know, the remains of dead white people or something like that. You know, he could be talking on that level, but, you know, I don't know. That's up for interpretation. Then he said, when the revolution comes, Jesus Christ is going to be standing on the corner of Lenox Ave and 125th Street trying to catch the first gypsy cab out of Harlem when the revolution comes. So he's basically, you know, giving you this metaphor that, you know, the average image of Jesus Christ is some hippie looking white guy on the wall in the picture. And that image will be basically the same type of person that you're going to see trying to get the hell up out of Harlem. You know, in Harlem, of course, they're using Harlem as a reference because they're from New York. They're from the Harlem area. But, you know, it's more so a reference to the whole United States. You know what I mean? The whole world, basically. But more so the United States when the real revolution comes. So he's saying that Jesus Christ is going to be standing on the corner of Lenox Ave and 125th Street trying to catch the first gypsy cab. You know, that's what we used to call them, gypsy cabs, because of the, you know, just a nickname based on the people who drove them. You know what I mean? Like the Indians with the turbans and stuff like that. You know, that was one of those things they just thought was funny and just call them gypsy cabs. But, you know, if there's any other meaning to that, I never knew it. That's all I knew, was that we called them gypsy cabs because of the people who drove them. You know what I mean? But anyway, you know, so he's basically saying that the same white image that you know, reverence or worship is going to be the type of motherfucker who's going to be running up out the city when the real revolution comes, because that's not who you should really be, you know, worshiping and idolizing. You know what I mean? You know, that's just a small reference to how he feels about that image of Jesus. You know what I mean? So, and then he said, when the revolution comes, Jew merchants will give away matzo balls and gefilte fish to anyone they see with an afro. Frank Schiffman will give away the Apollo to the first person he sees wearing a red or blue dashiki when the revolution comes. So, you know, let's break that down real quick. So for me, he's saying Jew merchants will give away matzo balls and gefilte fish. So, you know, there's a lot of in New York, in Harlem, there was always a pretty big Jewish community, and so you could always find places where you can buy Jewish food, such as matzo balls and gefilte fish, and it's good food. I've had it before. Knishes, those are really good. So he's saying that those types of merchants, the Jew merchants, will be giving away their food to anyone they see with an afro, because the real revolution is going to be when the black folks stand up and rise up and start doing shit to take back our independence and to take back freedom and to take back our respect. You know what I mean? That kind of shit. So he's saying that those Jew merchants, they're going to be so petrified that, hey, you can come in here, you can get free food if you one of the revolutionaries. Here you go, here you go. So then he said Frank Schiffman will give away the Apollo to the first person he sees with a red or blue dashiki. Frank Schiffman is a guy who used to run the Apollo. I don't think he does anymore. I think he's maybe passed on, but his sons eventually took over, and I'm not even sure if they are still in the mix no more or not either. I think they might have given up on it, but if they are, that's props to them. But he's saying Frank Schiffman will give away the Apollo to the first person he sees with a red or blue dashiki. You know what I mean? And that's not really a gang reference when he's talking about red or blue. He's just saying that was just a popular thing. People would, have dashikis on, and it would either normally be something like a red or a blue or, some kind of mixture of colors. But, mostly the white people didn't wear dashikis. You know what I mean? That was mostly us. That was a black thing. So then he said, when the revolution comes, afros going to be trying to straighten their heads, and straightened heads going to be trying to wear afros. Think about that. Ain't we in those times right now? And we've been in those times for a minute. And then he said, when the revolution comes, but until then, and I know niggas will party and bullshit and party and bullshit and party and bullshit and party. Some might even die when the revolution comes. Oh, man. Well, actually, he said some might even die before the revolution comes. My apologies. But, and the party and bullshit, some of y'all might know that because Biggie Smalls used that reference in one of his songs, called it Party and Bullshit. He was more so using it in a comical, just street reference. But, he's actually kind of fulfilling that prophecy, because that's what people are doing. That's what most black people are doing, just partying and bullshitting. Not preparing, not taking shit serious, not getting ready and saying, you know what, we need to make a change, so let's get ready. Most of us are partying and bullshitting. There's only a small group of us who are probably really ready if some shit jump off. So, I'm just saying, we need to get out of that mind frame of just trying to live our best life and, oh man, I just ate good. Oh man, I just smashed. Oh man, I just did this and I just partied. And you know what I mean? I just went to the beach and I just went here, and that's all we living for, shit like that, to take a nice vacation. You know what I mean? Everybody deserves a little vacation, but for some of us, that's all we live for, is the party and bullshit. So, it's a deep song. I mean, I don't even call it a song, but it's a deep poem. And I thought the lyrics were dope enough to where we should really talk about that during Black History Month. So shout out to the Last Poets. You know what I mean? Those brothers were deep. I actually got a chance to meet one of them in person, the brother named Omar, because I'm Muslim and he is Muslim. And, he came here to my city of Greensboro, and we, stood in prayer together at the mosque. And, he was a great dude, got a good head on his shoulders. And I do follow him on social media, so he's got social media out there, and every now and then I send him a message, just to give him, greet him or whatever. But just want to drop that lyrical breakdown. I really think it's important for us to think about stuff like this during Black History, actually all the time. You know what I mean? So think about that the next time, you know, that you trying to educate yourself. Go back and check out anything from the last poets. Anything. It's deep, you know what I mean? It's deep with the for the mental, but it can also come off a little raunchy because they do use a lot of curse words, and you know what I mean, they talk about sex and all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, you're gonna get an earful with them. You know what I mean? I just chose something that was a little more Black power, you know what I mean? So get ready for that. Anyway, for the Triad Hip Hop Podcast, this is your man Kurt, and I appreciate y'all listening to me. Don't forget, hit the like button, share this with your followers, and subscribe, and tell others to subscribe who you think would like the content, and we'll see you on the next Lyrical Breakdown. All right? Peace.